We need those here in the United States. But Europe is a very big trading partner for us. And Europe is going to head into recession this year. That's going to be a drag on our economy. When we see these events unfold, and they're going to unfold somewhat quickly, the result may be that the euro has no choice but to decline against the dollar. Why? Well, the only solution in Europe, the only solution for them, is to reduce their currency, is to print like crazy, is to cut rates, and you will see them cut rates tomorrow. When they start doing these things, that's a drag on their currency. And as the currency declines against the dollar, smart money in Europe says, well, how do I take advantage of this? Well, what they start doing is buying US denominated assets like bonds, mortgage bonds, treasuries, things of that nature. Because while they park their money in the US for a year, if they spend 100,000 euros and buy today, let's call it 130,000 US dollars worth of bonds, a year from now they get a little interest on that, so whether they have 133,000 or something like that, 134,000, in a year from now, if the euro and dollar are at parity, when they repatriate that money and bring it back, they now have 133 euro for their 100 euro investment or 100,000 euro investment. They can make 35% on their money relatively quickly, painlessly, and the way they're doing that is by buying our debt. So if the printing presses start, which they will, money will flood to the US, we'll see interest rates decline, but that trade will unwind, which is why you probably have an opportunity in the very near future to see interest rates drop. I wouldn't be surprised to see the 10-year Treasury note to go to 1.5% from its current levels around 190 right now. And I think mortgage rates could drop by another 0.3% to their lowest level that we'll probably see in our lifetime. Now, that said, what does that mean for us? It means that this is just an amazing opportunity for real estate. It's one where people will look back upon 2012 and you're going to get all the woulda, shoulda, couldas. Just like people talk about 2009, the stock, oh, I wish I would have bought when the S&P was at 65.52. I'm sorry, with 666, the Dow was at 65.52. I wish I would have made those purchases at that time, but I didn't. This is the time to do it in real estate. And let's talk a little bit about why. Well, first of all, with rates where they are, how can you really assure yourself of price guarantees in the future? Well, you really should start thinking about using FHA transactions. Because there's an element of an FHA transaction that is an unbelievable selling feature. And as of right now, they are still assumable. So think about this, ladies and gentlemen. The home that you sell to your customer, 10 years from now when they're ready to move, that FHA loan being assumable at 3.5% or whatever it's going to be, when rates are at 7 or 8%, how much faster is that home going to come off the market? How much more of a price can that person get when they go to sell that home? Look, as I said, information is everywhere. Is this information out there? Yes. But you have to present it in a knowledgeable way to your customer, and that will help you gain additional sales and help you, in addition to gaining more sales, get more listings. Because that customer will pay you for that knowledge. All right, let's take a look at some slides. I'm going to try and go quickly here. Here we go. Let's start with the first one. The first one is a very important one because this is one that people touch upon, but look, you need to keep the rain off your head, right? You need a place to live. And there's a competitive environment. You have three choices. You live with mommy and daddy, you rent, or you own. That's it, okay? Unless you want to live on the streets, which is not something people want to do, certainly. Now, there typically is a premium for people to do this, to own a home versus renting a home. And the historical premium in Orange County and in Los Angeles, as you can see, is about 83% higher. Los Angeles, 57% higher. What we're seeing right now is that, not taking into consideration the tax advantages, we are well below historical norms, meaning that prices are on sale. Not just the fact that real estate has come down either 35 or 40 or 45 or 50% on sale. It's on sale when you consider I need to live somewhere, and what would my monthly payment differential be if I chose to own or if I chose to rent. Those differentials have reached historically low levels, far below the norm, and more importantly, in some cases, you have the ability to actually purchase a home cheaper than what it would cost you to rent without taking into consideration any of the tax benefits involved. But people think they need 20% down. People think they need perfect credit. I see it all the time on CNBC. The guest right before me says, yeah, the people need a 20% down. I'm like, are you nuts? get a house with 3.5% down. You can get the seller to pay your closing costs. You could be in a position where your credit does not have to be anywhere near pristine. You need a 640 credit score, 620 credit score. Look, it's not bad credit, okay? It's not the days where it's 0 down, fog up a mirror, and get a mortgage, regardless of whether you've done terrible things to your credit in the past. It's not that, and that's smart, that's good. The real estate market is clearly putting in a bottom here. If you've been watching the numbers, you can see that. So let's take a look at the next slide here. And when you take a look at the costs involved, and I'll try and point to it here, the costs involved, it is actually now more expensive to rent than buy. And remember, that's right now. According to rent.com, rents are going up at 7.4% a year in this marketplace. 7.4% a year. Your mortgage would stay the same. Well, maybe once in a while your taxes go up. Maybe your insurance goes up a little bit. But it's not going to go up by 7.4% a year on your overall payment. Nowhere near that. So it becomes increasingly a better deal for you to purchase this home over time. It becomes a more wise and wiser choice as you go along. So distressed sales are expected to be about 29% of the marketplace right now. And when is that going to clear? Well, we see that clearing over the next 3 years, where it really begins to make a difference. In 2016, distressed sales are clearing. If we take a quick look at the volume levels, it's obvious you can see there's a clear downturn over the next 3 years. Now, when is the most opportune time to purchase your home? You purchase your home in advance of not after the event happens, right? People live in a home, according to the Census Bureau, believe it or not, for 13 years. Everybody's so concerned about where the home price is going to be 6 months from now or a year from now. What difference does it make? Because rates will be up. Home prices will likely be stable for the next year or two. Could prices drop a couple of percentage points? Absolutely. But you'd be paying more if interest rates went up a little bit, even if the home price were less. Vacancy. Now, this is really an important one here. If you take a look at vacancies, and when we hit the peak of almost 3.5 million vacancies in homes in 2009, you can see 2010, 2011, these are not real good figures here, but look at how much we more than cut that differential by more than half. Look at how much it drops off next year and the year after. And then the demand for housing becomes to where there's an actual shortage of housing by 2015. Shortages in housing lead to greater price appreciation in homes and in rentals. And when rents go up, that competitive environment, once again, look, there's another factor right now that people don't talk about, and that's the psyche of the seller. Sellers are hearing all this negativity in the market. You can use that to negotiate better prices. You know how quickly that sentiment changes. When home prices start appreciating, that seller's fear quickly turns to greed, and they're far less likely to make concessions. Okay, so when is the housing market going to clear in the United States? We feel that our work shows by 2015, most markets in the United States will have had the excess inventory clear. But Los Angeles and Orange County in particular are clearing well in advance of that. By the end of this year, Orange County will be in much better shape. Los Angeles by the end of 2014. Ladies and gentlemen, this bus is leaving. This train is pulling out of the station. You need to get on the bandwagon and get your customers in there. There needs to be a sense of urgency for people to take advantage of the opportunity to purchase a home today at these interest rates. Now, when we take a look at where home prices are right now in Los Angeles and Orange County, we are at the same level that they were in 2003. So if you look at your MLS listings, if you look at what prices were going for in 2003, which is before the big move higher, when people couldn't wait to buy a home. It's the same home. In 2003, with a higher interest rate, people are fighting each other and paying more than appraised value. Now, no, I don't want it. Tell me what sense that makes. I mean, really, now I know we've got a little bit more inventory, but do you know that what people don't talk about? I know these guys talk a lot about the supply of homes, and that's a great number, by the way. The only reason I don't like that as much is I don't like it because it's too wild. And you can see even on the charts, it swings too much because it's based on too many variables. It's the pace of sales against the inventory. I like to look at just the inventory because the inventory tells you a picture that is really clear. And we've seen a 12% decline in levels of inventory in the past 6 months. This is not an immaterial number, ladies and gentlemen. 12% fewer homes on the market in a 6-month time frame. That is quite something is happening. in the last 6 months. Whether it's race, whether it's sentiment changing, whether it's the economy has stopped getting bad, whether we've kind of hit a bottom in housing, something's going on. 12% decline in inventory in a 6-month period. I challenge you to look back in history and see numbers like that, or make it not be meaningful. Now, here's a very important chart for you. And this goes back to the first lesson we learned in our economics class in school. What's it all about? It's supply and demand, ladies and gentlemen. Okay? Supply and demand. This chart, the lines in red show you household formations. Okay, what's a household formation? 2 kids get married, they start a home, they move out of their home, their mom and dad's shelter, and they buy a home. That's a household formation. A couple gets divorced. They were living in one home, now they need 2 residences. That's a household formation. The completions represent homes put on the market, more than likely through construction. Now, the last time that the number was positive for household formations versus completions, in other words, when there was more demand than supply, was 2003, before the big run-up. Take a look at every year since then. Every year since then, dramatically greater supply than demand. Duh, no wonder why we had a housing bubble. Okay? And it's the first thing we learned in economics. You do not have to be a rocket scientist to see this coming. Now, in 2011, at the end of 2011, this is the first time in 8 years that the scales have changed in balance. Now it starts to come together. Okay, the economy starts getting a little better. We see household formations greatly outpacing completions. No wonder why 12% of the inventory disappears in a 6-month time frame. What does that tell us for the future? Let's take a look. As you can see, in 2011, this pace is expected to increase and last until 2015. Sheer demand for housing, ladies and gentlemen, sheer demand will clear the inventory and cause home prices to rise, either via people renting and making that brutal mistake today, or by making the right choice and owning. Now look, for renting, for some people, sure, it's a better choice. If you think you're going to live in this home for 2 or 3 years, of course it's smarter to rent, even though you know rentals are going up. Because why? Because there's a cost to buy the home. You have closing costs. And there's a cost to sell the home if they do it right, because you earn your money, you do a function for it, but it's a cost for them. If you live in that home for 2 or 3 years, they're not going to recover that cost. Rent. But if you're going to live in that home for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, or 13 years, like the Census Bureau says you will, well, you are going to be in far greater position in owning that home and overcoming that. And that's what people really need to be looking at. There's some headwinds out there. We know that. We understand. Just as Mark brought up on the jobs picture, you know, look, the jobs picture is not ideal. However, it is getting better, and we'll take that, okay? The unemployment rate is very misleading. And the reason why it's misleading is because while unemployment rate goes down, it's based on a household survey. And the jobs numbers that you see every month are based on a business survey. And there's models that are used, which are complex and not always accurate, and subject to great revisions. You know, there's something called a birth death model, which overstates job growth during good times and understates it during bad times. What happens in the circles of the unemployment rate that people don't often talk about is the participation of the labor force. We had about 147 million people in the labor force, and that has diminished significantly. It's down to about 132 million. When you have less people participating, those jobs over less people, the unemployment rate reduces itself. So are we creating some jobs? We are. However, our population grows by 0.9% a year. That's 0.6% via births, net births versus deaths, and 0.3% via immigration, net immigration. When we look at these numbers, and you would extrapolate them out, we need about 120,000 jobs every month just to keep pace with the new people coming into the job market. All these kids that graduate from school and want a job, well, we have to hopefully provide one for them, otherwise the unemployment rate goes up. So the jobs we're creating, while it's good, we need to do more. Can we do more? Of course. Yeah, where will the jobs come from? They will come. They've come throughout history. I'm optimistic about that. Now, at the present time, because the participation rate is low, and maybe there's a lot of factors for that. When you pay unemployment for a couple of years, I know we want to help people, but that's a disincentive to re-enter the job market. I think that as those unemployment benefits expire, our participation rates will have to grow. We'll probably see the unemployment rate go up, but in general, the job market's getting better. So while it's still a headwind, it will improve things. The other thing is that we do have some overhanging, but we talked about the overhanging inventory clearing. There's something else that you should know. Here's another tip for you. We talked about the FHA usage. Here's another one for you. We have been indoctrinated since we can remember. The first item we ever bought was probably something that had a 9 in it. The price was something $99 or $9.99 or $29.99 or $19.99 or on TV. See, just 3 easy payments of $19.99. Purchase this car, nothing down, and $2.99 a month, okay? We have been indoctrinated into the $9.99 world. So when someone goes to sell their home, or, gentle audience member, you and I potentially have made these mistakes too. In that we have thought that the best way to put a home on the market would be to advertise it with those 9s in it. And here's an important thing for us to remember. That home might be on the market, and let's pick a number and say it's $499, $990. It sounds good to the seller, and heck, it sounds good to us. And look, we just have to look at the MLS and see it is flooded with the 9s. What we want to do is take a look and see how do people, in fact, purchase a home. Because it's different. Buying a car, buying a candy bar, buying a record collection, and buying a home. Because when people purchase a home, they don't walk into your office and say, so, I would like to see every home on the market between 0 and 500,000. They don't do that. What do they say? Show me what you got on the market between 475 and 500. Maybe they say between 450 and 500. And you pull that up. And guess what? That home I listed for $499, $990 shows up and all is good. But the very next customer who walks into your office will say, show me everything on the market from 500 to 525, 500 to 550. Guess what? Even though your home was better equipped for them, was a better deal for them, and should have been caught and mentioned and shown, didn't show up. Now, how do we fix that? Listed for 500 even. I can't tell you how many people I've shared this with that have sent me emails and said, I presented this at a listing and got the listing because the competition didn't understand this one concept. Look, ladies and gentlemen, remember, information's everywhere. People will pay for your knowledge. All right, let's take a look here at, we talked about population, time and home. Historical appreciation has been about 6%, but even if appreciation drops to 2%, because of leverage, people put 10% down, let's just say. Let's use a simple example of a $100,000 home. If a home sells for $100,000, someone puts 10% down, it's a $10,000 investment. If that home goes up 2%, well, the first year that appreciation is $2,000, the next year it's like $2,100, and so on. You get the picture. But in that first year's appreciation of $2,000, if you take it based on their $10,000 investment, they made a 20% rate of return. This is what we have to explain to our customers because they don't see it, they don't get it, they don't understand. They think, oh, well, it's only about 2%, but that's 20% on your investment. The rest you have to pay either way in rents or on a mortgage, and you might as well build equity, take a tax deduction, right? I want to show you a way to look at a home as a business. And this is an important way to do it. Cash flow. Take your purchase price, and let's use that $500,000 example. And I don't care what the customer is doing, whether they want to take no mortgage or whether they want to be in a position where they have 10% down, 20%, 50% down, whatever it is. Model it like you do a business model. Take a 20% down, take an 80% loan to value. So that's a purchase price of $500,000, 80% loan to value, and $400,000 mortgage, and then tell me what the payment is on today's rates on a 30-year fix. I don't care what mortgage they intend to take out, do it on a 30-year fix. Again, it's a business model. Take that monthly payment and compare it to what that home would rent for. When you do that, let's use this example, $500,000, $400,000 mortgage, 30-year fix, taxes, insurance, on average that payment's going to be about $2,700, $2,800 a month. I bet you see a lot of homes on the market for $3,000 a month rental for that $500,000 home. History tells us when we reach these levels, it is a buying steal. It makes no sense because people's psyche has gone out of control. There's an old saying that if a cat sits on a hot stove, they won't sit on another stove, whether it's hot or cold. People have gotten burned. because they've gotten burned. They don't want real estate right now, when it's the exact opposite. It's exactly what they should be doing. They need to be purchasing homes right now as opposed to renting, because the herd mentality makes the wrong decisions. And guess what the herd mentality was 6 years ago? That same $500,000 home was $900,000. Mortgage rates were 6.5%. The monthly payment on that home was in the range of $6,000 a month. They could rent the home for $2,000 a month. They should have never purchased the home. It was out of whack. But the herd mentality said, you have to buy real estate at these levels. Everybody's doing it. Now you have to rent because everybody's doing it. Everybody's wrong. Otherwise you wouldn't be in this mess. Okay? You have to see the future before it becomes obvious. You have to see beyond what you can see in your headlights. We're all comfortable seeing what we can see in our headlights. But the headlights is a short distance. We have to have the confidence, based on history, of what is beyond the headlights. That's the key, ladies and gentlemen. We have to share that with our customers. Apartment demand is going to continue to rise. By 2015, it'll be up to 47 million. 7.4% increases annually. Calculate that and compound that out and see what it comes out to renting. Here's a scary thought. Kids between 25 and 34 years old living with their parents, so wonderful. There's 6 million of them. 15% of them. 15%! Okay? Now, we could probably all relate to this in some way or another. But this is well above historical norms where it's closer to 11%. Right before the boom, we were at 13%, we were at 5 million. That excess pent-up demand fueled the real estate market in appreciation. We've got much higher pent demand because people's psyche is out of whack. Rents are the key. You know what? I want to share with you an article that was in Time magazine. I know some of you have seen this. Some of you are kind enough to come back and visit with me a couple of times, so I do appreciate that very much. I want to share one more thing with you after this. It's an idea that I have to fix the housing market. I want to hear what you think. Time magazine said that the U.S. economy remains almost comatose. The slump already ranks as the longest period of sustained weakness since the Depression. We can't really argue with that. The economy is staggering under many structural burdens, which we've heard of late, as opposed to familiar cyclical problems. The structural faults represent once-in-a-lifetime dislocations that will take years to work out. Among them, the job drought, the debt hangover, the banking collapse, the real estate depression, the healthcare cost explosion, and the runaway federal deficit. I don't think any of us could argue with any of those points. They all are extraordinarily valid, and they're all very applicable to the market today. So I understand when Time magazine wants us to be cautious about buying a home, but here's the one important point to remember, that this article, it was written in 1992. And if you think that there are similarities between this article and the current environment, you're right. And in 1992, people were afraid to purchase a home. In 1992, people flocked to renting because we just had the big market crash from 1987, 88, 89. We had the banking collapse. We had many things that scared the daylights out of people, and their psyche was out of whack. There are many similarities here. People say history repeats itself. I say history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. Do you see some rhyming here? Because I sure do. We have to communicate this to our customer. And if the Census Bureau says you live in a home for 13 years, 1992, 13 years is 2005. How'd you do? Pretty darn good, didn't you? I want to finish with one thing, and it's an idea that I have, and I'm going to kind of give you a sneak peek. It's going to be getting some media attention over the next 10 days or so. I'll be on Fox and then CNBC talking about it, and I'll give you a quick sneak peek because I'm on Fox and CNBC a little early in the morning on the West Coast. That's pretty early for you guys. So here it is. Look, I admire the attempts to try and fix the housing market. But the attempts to do this are sometimes too academic in nature. And just like when the Fed comes out with some of its ideas, or the government comes out with its ideas, the unintended consequences appear. As Ronald Reagan said, the scariest things you hear are from the government, and I'm here to help. So we know that there may be good intentions, but there are oftentimes severe negative consequences that follow. And look, how do you fix the housing market? It is not an easy problem. This is a solution I've been working on for the better part of 8 months. And I've done a lot of research, done a lot of homework. This is not a harebrained scheme. This is over a lot of time. And I'm very fortunate. I have a lot of contact with some of the most brilliant minds in the money management world, on Wall Street. I mean, I belong to some really important teams and circles, and I do a lot of work for Bloomberg, and I write a piece on the economy for some of the largest hedge funds in the world. And I've run this past them, and they can't poke holes in it. So you guys are in the real estate market, maybe you can, and if you do, please help me, because I really want us to do some good here together. So here's the story. When you try and fix the housing market by saying, okay, if someone has a home and they're upside down, maybe, I'm going to talk middle America here. I am fully cognizant that your values are much higher here. Okay, so just multiply by whatever the multiples are, okay? But middle America now. You purchased your home a few years back, maybe in 2006, 2007, 2000. You bought it for $275,000. That was the average price back then. Today it's worth $200,000, which is reflective of the across-country averages. And you put 5 or 10% down, and now your mortgage balance is $220. So you are upside down, right? We all know the term. You have a $200,000 home, and it's a $220 mortgage. Now, apply it to wherever you are, okay? Whether it's a $400,000 home value and a $440 mortgage, a $600,000 home is $660. Do the math yourself, okay? We can get to, and not every situation is the same. So we have to take broad strokes here to get a concept. So by saying, look, we'll take your $220 mortgage at 6.5%, and because you've been making your payments, we'll refinance you to current rates at 4%. That's nice. But the customer is going to wake up one morning and say, why am I making these payments? I'll never get out from under. I'm still upside down. And the most important thing that these people fail to account for is the competitive environment of the choices that that customer has to keep the rain off their head. I can rent cheaper than what I'm paying on this home. Now look, we want to keep our credit pristine, but clearly the stigma of not paying your mortgage has gone away. In fact, when you tell this story to somebody, financial advisors have been known to say, are you nuts? Why are you making the payments on that? Why? Okay? So it's a good intended plan. But just take a look at HARP 1. Within 1 year, a 17% serious delinquency reoccurrence. That's within a year. In the mortgage business, we call that a short seasoning. You have to extend that out. The numbers don't get better. They get much worse as you extend that out. So what I'm saying is people are feeling this problem. Okay, my plan's a little bit different. You take the mortgage. I'm going to answer all the questions that you'll be thinking as we go, so stay with me on this. Okay. You take the mortgage, you split it in two. That 220 mortgage, you take an 80% loan to value on the value of the home currently. So the home's worth $200,000. You put a first mortgage in at $160. That first mortgage at $160 is on a 20-year fixed. Another creative idea I'm going to explain why in a moment. That 20-year fixed, $160,000 first mortgage is all you make payments on right now. I will get to the other 60. This is not a bailout. None of us have the stomach for a bailout. We do not want to create moral hazard. I got it. I'm going to tell you about it in a minute. The $160,000 mortgage, that's all you make payments on. The payment will save you roughly $500 a month. That $500 a month saving, we're all red-blooded Americans. What are we going to do with that? It wasn't even a multiple choice, was it? Okay? We take that $500 a month and we spend it, which gives the U.S. economy enormous stimulus without having to spend a dime and not having to tax you. And by the way, these gentlemen brought up some very wise points regarding taxation. There are some incredibly bright people known as Rogoff and Reinhardt who have done lots of work on this. And what they will tell you is there are multipliers. When you tax more, there's a 3-to-1 GDP multiplier with negative GDP. That's why extending these tax cuts are an important aspect of what's going to be going on. Okay, so back to our story. We spend this money. The economy gets a boost. And now, because it's a 20-year, you're amortizing more quickly. Do you know that within 2 years, that customer, including the second mortgage, which we will talk about, is cash flow positive, is positive equity. The number one reason people walk from homes and the number one reason they don't pay is because they're upside down. What's their incentive? As soon as they have skin in the game, their incentive comes back because now they have equity to protect. Okay, now, how about that $60,000 second? The $60,000 second, it can be securitized just like mortgage-backed securities are in a pool, and there's only one place it can sit, and that's at the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve puts it on its balance sheet, just like it did with QE1, when it bought $1.3 trillion in mortgage-backed securities. Okay, we're talking nowhere near these numbers. QE2, $600 billion of treasuries they put on their balance sheet. Operation Twist, $400 billion on their balance sheet. I am talking a tiny fraction of that they put on their balance sheet. They get a rate of return equivalent to the 10-year treasury, around 2%. The customer pays 2%, but they don't pay it up. It's paid in kind, PIK, it's called, PIK, which means the payments accrue, but you don't make them. Now, you can't sell your home for 3 years. And when do we sell our home? Look, Census Bureau says 13 years, you bought it 6 years ago, so now it's 2012, you sell it 7 years from now. I'm going to make an assumption here. I'm going to make an assumption for a very modest and below what most experts are forecasting, 3.5% rate of appreciation. This is far below historical, far below forecasting, but I'd rather be conservative. At a 3.5% level of appreciation, that home, which is $200,000 today, in 7 years is worth $254,000. Now, is that such a far stretch? Well, think about it. In 2006, it was $275,000. You're telling me we can't imagine 13 years later, it's $254,000. Of course we can. It's very logical. Now, the customer, they started with a 160 mortgage today. Because it's 20-year fixed, they've amortized it down to 115 in 7 years. They owe the second. That's grown from 60 to 69,000 because the interest is accumulated, even at 2%. Combined, they owe 184 on a 254 home. You've given that homeowner $70,000 in equity. You've given them hope. You've reestablished them. You put them back on their feet. Now, what's happened? The customer makes the payments because they have an incentive. It's cheaper than renting, and it's $500 a month less. The economy gets an enormous boost. You've kept the banking system shored up because, ladies and gentlemen, by banks having to write down, which is what the president just proposed, by having to write this down, it affects their capital ratios. I don't want to go too deep on this, but the lower their capital, the less they can lend. And credit is the lifeblood of this country. Do we really think it's wise to have banks lend less when we're trying to crawl out of a bad situation? We shore up the banking system. We ask them to take no write-offs. We bail off no one. The Fed gets its money, charges interest. The customer has new life. We stem the tide of foreclosures. We get the housing market on its feet. Now, sometimes you're going to have people that don't pay, of course. Sometimes you're going to have appreciation that doesn't pay off the balance. The Fed steps in there. The government steps in there, and the government eats that portion. But it's a lot cheaper than any bailout. I figured this out to be in the neighborhood, on worst case scenario, draconian cases, about $20 billion. And I've done all the numbers, $5.3 trillion in outstanding mortgages that would qualify. Only a portion of those are underwater, 25%. Only a portion of those are going to be qualified because they made their payments. Only a portion of those are going to be used in the second mortgage, and only a portion of those are going to go belly up. $20 billion in this day and age, ladies and gentlemen, is a drop in the bucket for all the stimulus that they will be getting. So that's my idea.
Can't compete. It's out of the box thinking, and we're very fortunate to have these three brilliant guys here today. So, do you have any questions? We asked you to write it down on cards. Did anybody write down a question on a card? Okay, that plan's not working. Okay, can we get the? I'm going to answer these questions first. Just to start off, while I read these cards, maybe Mark, you could launch in on what do you think appraisers are? There's a chill on the appraisal market. How does that? What's the psychology of low appraisals? I know everybody's been forced via regulations to be 100% accurate. What's with the conservative appraisal deal? How does that work?
When you said what was the psychology, I was going to say lousy. But it is, I think a lot of it had to do with, I've spoken to a lot of appraisal institutes, and I think a lot of these guys felt kind of cheap. They were forced to give inflated appraisals when at the top of the market. And you know, a lot of those guys are gone, and it's also being dictated to them by the regulators a little bit. The banks are saying this is that there's no set rule that you have to include a foreclosure in a short sale, but a lot of lenders are dictating that, and so it is. Some of it's rule based. Some of it I think is just after the experience that we went through. Folks are saying that we need to err on the side of conservatism. And then there's the unknown. I mean, there's the shadow inventory question is a big unknown, and the width in the estimates of how much shadow inventory, it starts at 1.6 million units, which is where we actually think it is, at the low end of it, because the shadow inventory is stuff in foreclosure or in pre-foreclosure that is not currently on the market. And I think a lot of people look at this and they start double counting and triple counting things that are already on the market. And so that unknown, the unknown on the shadow inventory, I think, is a big part of that psychology.
Okay, we appreciate that. Here's a general question. Would you how would you invest in real estate at this point? Who wants to tackle that one? Do you want to take a swipe at that?
To me, it's pretty easy. You try to buy, and this is not really doable in this marketplace. And I'll be honest about it. I bought 8 homes in the last 18 months.
Wow.
Almost every one of them. Almost every one of them. Well, here's the bad part. Almost every one of them out of state. But the reason that you do it is simply look at your return on investment with no assumption of appreciation. And look at the replacement cost. And ironically, the last 2 I bought were in a suburb of Phoenix, and they appraised higher than the short sale price. Now, I've been buying through short sales because I think short sales tend to be very painful. One of them took exactly 364 days to close, but you get value on that. I'm not able to buy through the REO market. I'm not a cash investor. And that happens to be the Phoenix market. But I think there's ways to do that. And I think you can do it very, very, I just got to tell you, one of the things I did is I'm a new grandfather. My daughter had twins a year ago. The first thing I did was buy, instead of doing a 529 account, I bought a property in Phoenix. It cost about $100,000. It rents for $1,100. I got a 15-year, 3.75 mortgage on it. That thing will be paid off, and if my children don't screw around with the account, it's going to be their college education. So I think there's a lot of ways of doing it. It's a lot harder here, unfortunately, in this particular marketplace. Your clients here are in position to do it in other marketplaces throughout Southern California, or for that matter, work on a referral basis out of state. But the fact of the matter is that you can buy a home that has a real return on investment fairly easily these days, of 10 to 20%. And you can do it below replacement costs. I don't see a lot of risk there as opposed to a 0.90 one-year CD. So from my standpoint, I think it's an incredible time to enter the marketplace. But by the same token, you have to be, you have to have a good realtor. Let me be blunt. You have to have a really good realtor if you're going to work out of the area. And again, I think you're going to start to see this. I don't think any of us want to see speculation in terms of the return being entirely based on appreciation. Even though I have a lot of confidence, that there is going to be appreciation, I just don't think that's a healthy or a safe thing to do. On the other hand, if you got real return, it's an incredible investment at this point.
I think the best advice you gave was, I think realtors have to push their clients to make decisions. I certainly had to learn how to do that. When I first got into the business, I was a little bit on the shy side. I got over that. And you've got to, sometimes your clients don't know what to do, and you gotta shove them. And I've had many clients come to me and thank me for. I've even talked to Jack's clients, and geez, they're thankful about him, and it's like, oh man, that's pretty hard to bear. But if you've got the right thing, if you've got the right product, if you've got the right rates, you got to push people to make a decision, because they can come up with 6 reasons not to do it. And Lord knows these bankers can come up with 6 reasons not to give you a loan, but you got to push them as well. Okay, so moving right along here. Let's see, this is for why have housing formations doubled or tripled in the past year after 2 or 3 years of decline? It's your turf, isn't it?
Yeah, okay. Is this live? Yeah. So housing formations actually have gone up only modestly. Where we see the difference between housing formations and completions is that completions have declined quite dramatically. So housing formations, they have moved up a little bit, but that's normal population increases. Let's remember that baby boomers were the largest demographic to shape the economic world that we have seen. We've lived through a lot of it many times, whether it was people buying Mustangs to minivans to homes. As the baby boomers have moved through the economic world, their demographic has dominated. Well, you have the echo boomers now. The echo boomers are actually larger than the baby boomers were. And those echo boomers are entering the home buying stages. And they're the kids of baby boomers. In the United States, the most common age in the United States right now is 52 years old. That is the most common age. So if you were to take a look at that and say, okay, so what is the age of kids that a 52-year-old might have? Could be in their 20s. People start purchasing homes in these times. Maybe they wait a little bit more these days, who knows, but this is coming. The echo boomer push is coming.
Excellent. Okay, Mark, I got one for you. You ready?
Sure.
Maybe check in your text messages there. I've got a 19-year-old son. I'm used to that. What is the future of new construction lending for condominiums? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Sure. Actually, I was looking up household formations because I was trying to figure out, when I saw that chart up there, the 2011 numbers seemed really high. I mean, compared to the numbers that I'd seen. All the numbers I'd seen show it's below a million. And I have to think some of that is policy driven, in that with the new healthcare law, which very few portions of it have taken effect, but one that took place immediately was that young people could stay on their parents' insurance until they were age 27. I come from a family of 9, and I can remember my older brothers and sisters being hounded to go get a job so they would have health insurance and move out of the house. And I think that it's a well-intentioned law, but one of the byproducts of that is that people are going to stick around the house longer because they can stay on the insurance. And but I have not seen that pick up in household formations. In terms of the condominium market and the lending environment, was the lending environment for condominiums, is that? Yeah, I forgot my question.
Yeah,
here.
that was the question.
Yeah.
About condominiums.
About condominiums. It varies by, all lending environments vary by what's happening in pricing right now. And that if you are in a market where prices are still sliding and there's a lot of potential supply to hit the market, the down payment requirements are much greater than they have historically been. And the credit quality restrictions tend to be, credit scores tend to be higher, the minimum credit scores tend to be higher. In very strong markets, though, if you've got a good banker who, because who's going to fight for you for that loan as it gets questioned down the line, they can stress where the market is better than what the overall market is, then they loosen up a little bit. But you really have to have a banker that's going to work with you and fight with you, because they're going to get a lot of resistance as it gets, because it looks pretty generic, but it's going to loan committee. It looks pretty generic as it's moving through the process. But it's quite difficult unless you have a significant down payment or property values have stabilized and there's not a lot of potential supply to the market.
Along those along the same lines, here's a question. Credit terms have swung a bit too far. They're too tight now. They were too loose. Now they're too tight. Even your best clients complain that, they just have to send in everything. It's on and on and on. I know everybody here, all the lenders here know that. You keep asking for questions. You got to give the copy of the account. You got to give the copy of the account that the wire came from. Well, the bank moved it from a savings account over to the checking account because they can't wire it from the savings account, so we need a copy of that. We need a copy of that. Basically, we're all potential terrorists and criminals, and it can only be found out through tremendous Xeroxing. So let's
PDFing now. I mean, look at
what's it going to take to come back to the middle here? Joel, do you want to take that? And then I think that's a question that all three of you ought to weigh in on.
Well, I think, again, rationality ought to have prevailed, but it hasn't so far. I think, I think Freddie and Fannie really have to be the ones you question because they are the market right now. And what we need to do is, I spend a lot of time with Fannie and Freddie, and we try to, explain to them why their underwriting should reflect a much safer environment than it was. And by the way, their new portfolio they've originated in the last 3 years is going to be one of the incredibly profitable. I mean, there's very little danger, it seems to me, in the new portfolio getting into problems, in part because of this overcorrection. But the overcorrection has taken, their credit score from 670. And by the way, the Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae portfolio was, if you take 2006, their default rate is 5.3%. That's pretty bad. However, if you take the private mortgage security-backed default rate, 18%. The traditional single-family mortgage, the Freddie and Fannie originated, even with all the BS going on, was still a pretty good loan. We could survive if the market was at 5.3%. If everyone had lent at the same level of Fannie and Freddie, we would not be in this predicament, believe it or not, as stupid as they were, and I can tell you how stupid they were. But the issue from our standpoint is they just got to go back to normal. Instead of pushing the credit score from 670 to about 730, I mean, that's a huge difference, particularly when people's credit scores are damaged. And one of the things, we'd like to see is them just go back to where they were, both on the credit side and on the asset side. Because the asset is inherently safer. They should be loosening up on the appraisal side in particular, because the fact of the matter is, you do 3 different valuations, and if you do the valuation, in many cases, predicated on the replacement value, that valuation is much higher than on the market value. So there are a lot of reasons why they should, but they're completely scared. A lot of the talent has walked out of the room. They're every time they look around, they're finding out that they can't get a bonus. So I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen there, and I would like to see everybody say the same thing, and the lenders themselves who are packaging the loans for Freddie and Fannie. I think if we all made a concerted effort to talk about what the reality should be, that you go back just to the standard, just back to the norm. What it was 10 or 15 years ago, we'd be fine. It's going to take some time, but I think we all know how to get there.
Barry, do you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I see it differently. I think actually the underwriting standards are smart right now. And I think it is back to the norm. I've been doing this for 30 years. I was top originator in the United States during most of the 90s.
Well, how many of you used to see it back to the norm?
Well, but it depends on what you say norm. If you consider norm to be, let me, again, fog up a mirror and have bad credit and borrow 100% and, why even do an appraisal? Why even look at my bank account? That's not normal, I'm sorry. That was out of control. What is normal is what we're seeing today. Look, do you need to have a job? What a concept. Do you need to have some down payment and some skin in the game? Oh my gosh, who would have thought of this? Do you need to be at least reasonable as far as your credit history goes? So you're not someone who's never paid a bill in your life on time? Well, I think these are smart choices, ladies and gentlemen. The reason why we're seeing a bottom in the housing market is because we're restoring confidence by making smart choices. It's not the time to be cowboys and Indians again. It's time to be intelligent. And by the way, you want to know why all this crazy Xeroxing happens? Thank your trial lawyers who try to destroy the mortgage environment. They get off scot-free. But believe me, when you say because someone didn't sign this way or the chain of signing was incorrect and therefore the people should not make their mortgage payment, there's a cost to that. The cost of that is, guess who buys these mortgages? You and me, okay? You and I deserve for our financial system to be assured that some attorney is not going to try and pull the rug out from under us have your portfolios and your mutual funds decline in value, and make sure that you're protected. Underwriting standards being more common sense and protective don't help Fannie Mae, they help you. Who is Fannie Mae? Who are they? Do you think they lend the money? That's what's so comical about this. Everybody forgets, it's your money. Please look in what's in your mutual funds. I know nobody reads the prospectus, but Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, Ginnie Mae bonds are what you invest in. It's your money. It should be protected. You deserve to be protected. And these are not outrageous requests.
Again, it's gone up from 670 to 720.
It's not 720. You can do mortgages at 620, no problem.
You can get them. I'm just talking about the averages.
But who cares what the average is? Oh, wait. When someone, hold on, you're wrong, because if somebody comes in and says, I want a mortgage and I've got a 620 credit score, can you get it or no? You say, no, you're not average. You get it. Now, do you pay a premium? You do. You do. Should you? Of course you should.
You know, if you look at the range of approvals, there's actually a slide, and I don't have it with me, that shows the range of approvals, and it has gone up, and so certainly you can get them at that lower FICO score, but you can't, you know, there are relatively few that are done there, but it's...
That's incorrect, sir. That's absolutely incorrect. Maybe at Wells Fargo, but in the real world, you get them done.
You know, there's only one set of numbers out
We're
there.
going to have to cut his bike here in a minute.
There's only one set of numbers that exist, and you know, it's not, you know, you've got a dispersion around a mean. I mean, it's and it's not where it used to be. You know, the era of cheap and abundant credit is over. Rates are low, but not everybody can get the low rates. Credit is not as abundant as it was before. It's changed. It's a permanent change, though, as permanent is. Not only did we extend credit to people that didn't qualify, but there was a lot of fraud, and the fraud was very weird. And people were falsifying their tax returns and stating that they made more income than they did, and they didn't really pay their taxes, but it made it look like they did, which is why you have to provide your entire tax returns instead of just the summary page. So there was a lot of fraud that was done, and so I understand it's a pain in the butt, because you know, even working at the bank, when I refied my mortgage, I had to supply all my tax returns, and but the funny thing was that when the person that was working on my file needed it to get done, it seemed like the rules got looser right there at the tail end, but not that loose. But still, the data requests do seem a little absurd, but thankfully they're PDFs instead of copies. But I don't know that it's going to get back to where it was before. I do think that the threshold, the FICO threshold, will get lower, because the delinquencies on the early delinquencies on Fannie and Freddie backed loans right now are half of what they normally would be. Not where they were the boom years, but where they normally were. So I know that lower end is going to come down, but it's probably another year or two off before it does. And I'm going to ship you a copy of the slides so you can see what's happened. I mean, I don't know if the low end is 620, what the absolute cutoff is right now, but it's a lot higher than the low end used to be, and that's
And it's real income. Yeah, you're forcing people. I don't have a problem with people producing their income. The problem I have, and I think we better recognize, it wasn't all about fraud. It was also about instruments. The instruments that were out there on the subprime level, you know, look at the difference on first payment default. Do you want to talk about first payment default? The classic first payment default, fraud or not, was you take out a second and you never make the payment. How were seconds underwritten 5 years ago? Well, pretty much the same first one. Try to get the data from Fannie or any lender. The criteria were the same. This is just not smart. And I agree, you have to underwrite correctly, but I think the pendulum has swung too far. And I have to agree with Mark. I think it'll loosen up. I think there's a lot of people who will not get loans, and they shouldn't get loans. But there's no reason to go from 670 to 720 or 730 at the same time when you have a better, asset on the valuation side, and you have credit that is actually being verified. There's no reason.
Okay, I'm going to give Barry the last word here.
All right. So look, I enjoy debating, but I really enjoy debating on fact. And the fact is that there's no problem getting a mortgage if you have 640 FICO, because every lender will do that. That you are just fully so going to pay a slight premium, not outrageous, but a slight premium. But why wouldn't that be? Why shouldn't you reward someone at the other end of it who's got perfect credit, who's less of a risk? I mean, heck, the people taking the risk are you. Once again, this is your money that's being lent. You should have risk-adjusted pricing. Now, most lenders will do 625 those. Below that, they're few and far between, but I think that's wise. Now, will the pendulum swing? Yes. There's one reason for that. It's called greed. Okay? The reason that pendulum will swing and the reason why underwriting standards will loosen up will be for one reason and one reason only, and that is a greed factor. The greed factor will be you get some people in a room that'll analyze the data and say we could take more tolerance and charge more. And that's what's going to happen. So, I remember back in 1990 when I was originating loans after the crash, they took away all the no-income transactions. I don't know if you remember them. And then when did they come back? At a higher price with a 4506. Then at a higher price still with an 8821 form. And then before you know it, why even ask about your income at all? As people got more comfortable with real estate in general as fixing every problem, and it did, because when prices on real estate go up, it doesn't matter, because you always have the ability to sell your home at a profit in a market quickly, and the lender isn't jeopardized. All the weaknesses got exposed once real estate prices stopped going up, and that's what we have to be careful of. So I think where we are right now is probably a good spot to be. And the reason why I like to debate this a little bit is because I love this housing market. I love this industry. And I've been doing it for 30 years, and it's been a good industry to me. And I think that when we talk about it, it should be talked about accurately. And when someone gets on CNBC and talks about that you can't do a mortgage with a 625 FICO, borrowers hear that, and it hurts the housing market because it's not accurate information. So.
Okay, we appreciate that. I'm going to wrap it up. That's going to be the last one. There's a couple other questions here that go unanswered, but Gary, you've got a couple people that want to speak to you if you can stick around.
Sure.
They're interested in your idea, but these guys have come a long way. They're smart people, and show them your appreciation by giving them a good round of applause.